What do you do when you have too many guppies and too many plants and an extra 20-gallon tank? Well, today we're setting up a guppy tank with all of these hundreds and hundreds of guppy fry. It might not be hundreds, but there's a lot in there. And we might even try adding some cherry shrimp. For the most part, the aquariums that I build on this channel, I try to use supplies and stuff that you guys and anyone can get their hands on, so it's easy to build and it's cheap. And that's especially true today with what we've got to build this tank. So we're gonna be using this 20-gallon long that was a used tank I got from a friend. Essentially garage sale price. Anyone can find a tank about this size at a garage sale on Facebook Marketplace. We just need a little LED strip light, a hang in the back filter, and a heater. And of course, everything that we're gonna decorate our tank with. And as you can see, we've got a variety of supplies here. We've got some larger stones, river rocks you can pretty much find outside. We've got some medium-sized rocks. And this is just like a paver sand. So you can get this at pretty much any hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, anything like that. They'll sell this type of paver sand. It's actually really natural looking. I mean, this is basically what you'd pull out of any riverbed. I mean, this is a fairly neutral color gray, slightly brown sand. It's gonna look nice in this tank. We've got some wood from a creek. You guys can find like fallen trees and roots and things like that. Roots are better because they last longer in tanks than actual like branch pieces and stuff. So this is a nice piece we're gonna use in there. We've got some extra rocks just in case those other ones aren't enough. Some various colors and shapes and sizes. So all of that stuff you guys can pretty much get for free if you just go outside, or you can get it really cheap at a garden center, hardware store, places like that. And you could honestly stop right there if you're not gonna go with stem plants or any plants that are gonna be needing nutrients from the soil. If you go to most pet stores, they're selling epiphytes, which is Java fern, anubias, things that you're gonna wanna attach to driftwood, attach to rocks, and not actually plant in the substrate. But these will actually pull nutrients from the water column, somewhat from their roots when they eventually get bigger, but the majority of their nutrients come from the water column, so you don't need nutrients in the substrate, which is what I'm about to explain right now. Since we are gonna have some rooted plants, we're gonna want some aqua soil or some kind of nutrient substrate that we can use to get this plant started out really nicely. We've got fluvial stratum right here, which pretty much any aqua soil is gonna do the same thing. It's basically just a nutrient clay, and that will, for the most part, stay pretty well compact at the bottom. If you just use that, you definitely do not want to rinse this stuff. This stuff is not meant to be rinsed. You're basically just going to want to make a 1 to 2 inch layer on the bottom of your tank. You can obviously slope it towards the back, higher in the back to add some extra dimension and extra room for the plant roots. And then you can cap that off with a type of sand or another type of gravel if you want to, or you can plant carpeting plants right into that, and then the carpeting plants will spread out and cover the bottom of your tank. I don't have enough sand to cover the bottom of the tank. So actually what I'm gonna do is use the majority of these rocks, these, and those other stones down there, and then make primarily the sand cover sort of maybe the front half around to the side with sand, but we still wanna use the aqua soil. So we're gonna fill these mesh bags with aqua soil, and like we've done in a previous tank, we're just gonna lay the bags in the sections that we're gonna plant our stem plants. And then once these bags are covered with sand, the aqua soil inside will attract the plant roots. The roots will come down and pierce these bags, and the plants will be able to feed off of this aqua soil. And now for the front bottom of the tank, we're gonna have a pretty thin layer of sand. So what we're gonna do is actually crush up some root tabs, and that's gonna go under the sand and give some nutrients for any grasses we might plant in here, or plants that are gonna be planted basically directly into the sand without a bag of aqua soil underneath them. And I have a bunch of extra plants left over that I need to either use or set up in another system to continue growing, because you might remember in a previous video we had a big plant rack over here with plants I was growing immersed in tubs, but we've since moved that for the koi pond that we now have here. And I'm just sort of downsizing the number of plants that I was growing, as well as trying to find another spot for them. So until we do that, we've got some extra plants, and instead of just letting them wither away and die, we're gonna use them in our guppy tank today. So let's get started building this tank, and this is gonna be pretty much a step-by-step guide on how to build a beautiful looking tank extremely cheaply, in a tank that is going to withstand nutrient spikes and algae and things like that that you pretty much come to know when you have fish tanks and you don't have any nutrient substrates, plants, fish, shrimp, anything that's gonna eat the algae, convert the nutrients into more plant growth. Artificial freshwater tanks are one of the hardest tanks to maintain because they just take so much work to clean and maintain all of the algae growth that just happens on the fake substrates and the fake plants and stuff like that. So today we're building a low maintenance tank with guppies and shrimp. Let's not waste any time, let's get right into this. So I think we'll start with the largest pieces that we know we want in the tank, and that's basically driftwood and rocks. So I think we're gonna put this, just based on how the wood is shaped, we're gonna put this sort of maybe more in the left half, left third of the tank. I always like to keep in mind where the filter and the heater are going to be, so we can either place them in spots where we won't see them, or we can make sure we leave room for plants. So I know that we want a few bags of aqua soil back here, but in order to keep sort of the aqua soil and the sand that we have back there from coming forward, put a few rocks in here. And I'm also using the shape of the rocks to try to fit them in like little puzzle pieces so that everything looks like it's been melded together for a while. So that's most of the big rocks in that I wanted to use, and we've sort of got some nice planting space back here. We've built it up a little bit around here, some space and allowing this to be built up farther in the back. We've got just a couple random rocks off to the side. We're gonna mix those in with some medium-sized rocks to help blend those in, and that'll also help keep some height over here in the corner. We might put another bag, have a little bit deeper over there. So now I think we can put in some of those medium-sized rocks. Like I said, these rocks are really just to sort of keep the substrate from coming through the back. If we really wanted to, we could stick some filter floss, some filter sponge or something in these little cracks and crevices around here so that nothing would actually come around, but I don't know if I really want to bother with that. Okay, looking good so far. So we've got a media bag full of aqua soil we're going to place in here. We'll probably do 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe four or so total. And then we'll do one more on this back side. We've got our media bags back in this corner and all along the back. Now we need to crush up some root tabs and sprinkle some root tab dust all over this front section for any grass. Actually, I think we might just keep it condensed to around the structure because we probably won't end up having much grow out here. It'll just be some grasses or some smaller plants that grow around the structure. So let's get that crushed up right now. These are a little hard, so it's kind of difficult to crush these up. Nice. We've got our root tabs, crushed up plant fertilizer on the bottom, ready to get capped with sand. And so the purpose of this really is to just feed the plants until the fish can start supplying and the shrimp can start supplying enough nutrients that can seep down into the substrate and start feeding them on their own. But if you're going to use an inert substrate like sand on its own from the start, there won't be any nutrients in there for the plants to use. So you got to start them off with something. Usually you have to supplement with some potassium, trace minerals, other elements that don't actually get supplemented or don't actually get added to the aquarium by the fish or by the fish food. And usually that's going to be phosphate, potassium, calcium, magnesium, all of those other macro and trace elements that you can usually add with just a fertilizer, as long as the plants have their main nutrients in the soil, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. I'm just going to add a couple more rocks to fill in some spots. So because I only have this much sand, I'm trying to best utilize what I do have. So we want to make the sand go as far as possible. We're going to add the sand in the places where I know we need it the most first, which is going to be in the back. That corner, we know this needs to be pretty high. Let's get some sand in there. And then just so I don't mess anything up, we're going to add a little bit of sand at the top of the front so we can get the root tabs covered and locked down. And then we've obviously got to cover these bags in the back, so we're going to make sure we do that. I'm going to add some more rocks around this aqua soil bag because I have a feeling it might be kind of hard to keep that covered with as much or as little sand as we have actually. More sand. All right, I think we're looking pretty good there. I'm just gonna add a couple more rocks just to add some more interest. That is a pretty solid foundation we have now. I think that looks pretty good. Looks pretty natural from all angles. We got the sand piled up higher in the back. You can see our little aqua soil bags under there. I might need to add a little more sand in the future to the front because that's pretty thin up here. But for the time being, I'm just gonna plant a few things, some grass or some Monte Carlo maybe, around in these little pockets where it's a little bit deeper than maybe out towards the front. And those will just slowly creep. Now you might be thinking at this point, how is that driftwood not going to float? Because it's dry. It is definitely dry. It is absolutely going to float. So we have this rock that we are going to temporarily set on this, and by temporarily, I mean for the next few months. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I've used all my super glue for my reef tank, and right now I realized I have no super glue. So I can't actually glue this down the way I would normally glue it down. Ideally, you would have some contact points between the driftwood and the rock. You could stick in some tissue paper and add some cyanoacrylate super glue, places like these where it contacts right there, and that would help glue all of this together to be one giant weight and will keep the driftwood down. But since I don't have any glue, we're gonna add a rock. And you guys can do the same thing if you're too scared to use super glue or you don't have any, or I don't know what other reason why, maybe you wanna use a rock. This doesn't look good right there, but we're probably not going to actually plant any plants where that is, at least we won't today. So we're going to plant around it, and you guys are going to imagine what it looks like without that rock there. And then in a couple months, when that wood is fully waterlogged, you just pluck the rock out gently to make sure it's finished absorbing water, and the log should not float. We just got to give it time. What I'd like to do now is actually spray all of the substrate and the rocks with some water. That's going to make it easier to plant, as well as it's going to take all the fine dust particles that might be on the sand, and it's going to sift them down. It's going to make all of those fine particles go down to the bottom of the sand. And once everything's all full, then it's much harder for them to get out. So you'll have a lot less cloudy water if you spray everything evenly and allow it to penetrate through the substrate. That's what I've found, at least. So here we've got our plants. I've gone around and collected out of some of my other tanks some plants. We've got Ludwigia arcuata, which can sometimes be a sensitive plant and tends to melt on me occasionally, although it's growing profusely in this 40 breeder that has like 99% Java moss in it. It's actually growing straight through the Java moss. There's plenty of this in there. I thought we could try this in this guppy tank. We have one of my favorite plants, Rotala rotundifolia. Beautiful, orange, red, purple leaves, thrives in almost every tank I put it in. We've got Ludwigia palustris. This is a fantastic red plant. It's almost impossible to make this plant not look red. Most of the tanks I put it in, it's done really well, especially this nano tank with cherry shrimp in it. They keep it, nice and clean. The cherry shrimp, most Neocaridina shrimp are really good at eating all of the dead matter on the plants, as well as snails, ram's horn snails that I have in my tanks do that too. Especially in newly established tanks or tanks you're planting with new plants, it's really important to have either snails or some shrimp in there or something to consume all of the dead and dying plants that maybe they're acclimating from immersed growth to submersed growth, and they need to grow new leaves and shed their old leaves. All that dead and decaying matter is going to cause the plant to rot if it's not actually eaten by anything and removed from the aquarium. So these plants are coming preloaded with some ram's horn snails. And as long as you don't overfeed your tank, you will not get an explosion of snails. And if you have an explosion of snails, feed your tank less, feed your fish less, and your snail population will level out and reduce to a manageable level. And under here we have some Monte Carlo and Eleocharis parvula. This is a shorter hair grass, doesn't need as much light, doesn't need CO2, does really well in my tanks. We're gonna plant the hair grass sort of around the edges of this little outcropping here where there's not gonna be much. We'll do some Monte Carlo in some pockets along the edge of the scape or the main rock scape. We'll do a few different pockets of Ludwigia palustris since I have most of that, and then maybe 2 groupings of the Rotala rotundifolia, and then 1 small grouping of the Ludwigia arcuata. So let's get this thing planted and filled up. Sweet, so we got our 4 ground plants in, our ground covers. I'm gonna try to plant the stem plants right now. Sometimes I like to add water, just so you can see where they're gonna be standing up, but since the tank's not very tall, the plants won't be very tall and it won't matter that much to be able to see them completely standing up straight to know where to plant them. I pretty much know where we're gonna plant them, so let's get these guys in the tank. We're gonna divide the Rotala rotundifolia into 2 bunches, and we'll do 1 grouping on the right side and 1 grouping on the left side. Not as deep as I would quite like to keep these stem plants in, but we'll see if that works. If they come up, we can always replant them. So we'll have a nice negative space in the right third of the tank. It'll be open right here. Plants on the right, plants on the left. And now we've just got all of our Ludwigia palustris red left, just sort of put in the center. Well, there we go. So we got our ground covers, our stem plants, all of our plants in here. We might add a few more in the future, but so far this looks great. It looks really natural. If you plant in the right spots, it doesn't look like it's too sparse if you don't have enough plants. You could go to the store and get some tissue culture cups, and of the dwarf hairgrass, this is probably a quarter of one of those cups. Same with the Monte Carlo, this is probably a quarter or half of one of those little tissue culture cups. So you could buy 1 cup and do this entire tank if you wanted to, the same way I did, and maybe 2 or 3 bundles. You could probably get away with 2 bundles of plants, stem plants for the back, and you have essentially the same tank that I just built. Extremely cheap sand, extremely cheap river pebbles and rocks, free driftwood, garage sale tank. This has got to be one of the cheapest tanks I've ever put together. Now I'm gonna put a top on it and we're gonna fill it up. So now we can go catch all of our livestock. And that's gonna be all of these baby guppies. And we're also gonna pick out some cherry shrimp. And let's start with the cherry shrimp because they're gonna take the longest to acclimate. So while we let those acclimate, we can catch the fish. And we actually don't need that many. Maybe even less than 6 would be just fine. But we're gonna do about 12 because just 6 to 12 are gonna double and triple, if not turn into 50 or 100 within a few months. Now, since we used reverse osmosis water, we're gonna need to remineralize this so that it's good for the cherry shrimp. And we're just gonna add some to bump up the carbonate hardness in the water so that the shrimp have enough minerals in their water for their exoskeletons and so they can molt properly. And now we can go struggle to catch these microscopic guppies. So I've done the best I could getting all of the babies out of this tank. Now there's probably a couple, I think there's still a few in here that we can get out later, but for the most part, we have all of the babies right here in this cup. I don't know how many is in here, I lost count honestly. There's probably 50 or 60. Now we're gonna take these guys over here to the tank. We're gonna stick them in just like we did with the shrimp. One thing I did forget to do, I need to put this pre-filter on the intake for the hang on the back because it's just got the holes for this filter intake are way too big and they're gonna suck up babies and they're gonna suck up the shrimp. So we've gotta put this on the filter intake. We've been adding a little bit of water to the shrimp's container every so often to get them acclimated, and we'll do a few of these for the fish as well. That's going to acclimate them to the hardness and the pH, and the temperature will acclimate through the plastic.
A few moments later.
All right, so it's been plenty of time. These guys are well acclimated. Temperature of the tank water, 75. Shrimp, 74.8. That's close. 74. within 1 degree of the tank water. So I think we'll add the cherry shrimp first, let them fly around and get settled before we add the fish, just to give them a few extra seconds to get some cover, just in case the fish are curious. All right, so we'll just go ahead and do this all at once. There they go. Straight to work. I love these little guys. And now for all of these guppies. All right, we'll do these guys all at once too. Make sure we don't have any stragglers. There's so many in here. That's pretty much gonna do it for this tank, guys. The only thing we need to watch out for in the next few days to make sure we don't have any ammonia spikes because of all the fish we put in here, but we are running cycled filter media in our filter in the back, as well as all the bacteria that was on all of these plants that we put in here. So if you're gonna be setting up a tank like we did in today's video and stocking it instantly on day 1, you're gonna wanna make sure that you have some test kits, some liquid or strips, anything that can detect ammonia or nitrite. Liquid test kits are better than the strips. You basically just need to see if there's any ammonia building up in the tank that isn't being cycled. Ideally, you would set your tank up and let it run for a few days, a few weeks, and get the biological processes going that convert ammonia into nitrite and then into nitrate. But since this is a fresh tank, we definitely had to use cycled filter media so that it can get straight to work and start breaking down the ammonia that we just put in here through all these fish. I will have to get a bigger light for the top of this tank because this is too small for the top and it doesn't actually reach each end, so we have some dark sections on the left and the right. But besides that, I think this tank turned out really great. The little guys are loving the flow in this tank. They're right in the flow right here along the front. There's so much for them to do in here versus that little 10-gallon they were just in. And now they're not competing for food with the adults that are much bigger and much easier able to eat the food, so they can grow much faster in this tank as well. I tried to make today's video a little shorter with a quick build of a new tank. So if you guys like this video, I would really appreciate a like. If you don't want to miss any of the new stuff we're doing in the fish room, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.